Have you ever been thinking about someone and then out of nowhere they call you? Or how about walking into a room and feel something before anyone says anything? Guys, welcome back to Hypnovision Studios, and today I've got something very special for you. We are going to dive deep into the mysteries of telepathy, ESP, clairvoyance, and even the quantum entanglement theories. I have a lot packed in this episode for you guys, and I do hope that you stick around. And if you're new, thank you for stopping by. I hope you do subscribe and smash that like button, because we are going to dive deep in this one. That invisible sense, that quiet knowing, the kind of thing we are taught to just simply ignore as coincidence. But what if it isn't? Today, the topic walks between science, intuition, and the unseen. It is thought transmission, ESP, and psychic synchronicity. I'm not just going to throw studies out there and get lost in theory. I'm going to share a few personal moments that have made me question everything I thought I knew about thoughts, time, and connection. Because honestly, the more I paid attention, the more things started to shift. And that shift, it said to me, there's something here worth exploring. So whether you're deeply spiritual, scientifically curious, or just open to the possibility that thoughts carry more power than you think, let's explore this together. So guys, we're going to start with the basics, and I'm going to do a little impromptu in between these segments. ESP stands for extrasensory perception. It's a fancy way of saying sensing beyond the five senses. And if you've watched my channel long enough, you know I often talk about how the five senses gives us 5 dimensions of understanding. Because the audio or the auditory experience, that is only but one dimension. Smell is only but one dimension, and so on and so on. So if you ever see the 5D hashtag or people talking about 5D, we are talking about 5 dimensions of the 5 sensory input. And when you combine them all together into one, you have 6. So we are talking about matters of the mind. Now, thought transmission is a term that you probably hear often these days. It is the idea that one person's focused thought can influence another, not through speech or action, but through energy, through intention. You might have heard people say, "We're all energy." And it sounds poetic, but it's also true. At the most basic level, everything is vibrating. Everything is particles, including your thoughts and your emotions and attention. And here's where things get interesting. What if you intensely focused on someone? Could they feel it? I started asking myself these questions because, like many of you out there, I've had moments where I knew someone was going to call or text me, and they did. It wasn't random. It wasn't every day. But it happened enough that I couldn't write it off once I started to pay attention. Here's where things started to bend the edges of what we think is possible. In quantum physics, there's a phenomenon called entanglement. Basically, 2 particles, once connected, can remain linked across space and time. Even if they're separated by galaxies, what happens to one will instantly affect the other. That's not theory either. It's something observed in lab after lab. So guys, here is where things start to get really interesting, because there is scientific evidence that backs a lot of this stuff up. Now, guys, we are not made of particles. We are particles. And some researchers and philosophers have asked, if our thoughts are energetic patterns, could they behave the same way? Now, me personally, I do believe this is true. However, if you're a skeptic out there, drop a comment and let us know as we are moving along what you think about some of these concepts, and I will try to add in graphics and different links as I go along in the post editing to make sure that I am able to give you guys enough information to make an educated decision or statement in the comments section. Think about the people in your life that you're the closest to, your partner, a best friend, a parent, maybe someone that you're no longer in contact with, but feel a connection to. Is it really so far-fetched to think that there's some kind of energetic entanglement here? That your thoughts and theirs somehow still interact? Now let's bring in something even stranger, the observer effect. In quantum experiments, when we observe a particle, just like the act of watching, it behaves differently. It collapses into a specific state from a field of infinite possibilities. Now, guys, if you know about the observer effect, that's a whole separate topic. But when it comes to the thought transmission, ESP, clairvoyance, and some of these other unseen forces, right? The observer effect is really an interesting one. I have covered it on my channel before, and there are a lot of videos out there. It is the photon that seems to be intelligent. It is the light itself, which is the source of everything. Think about it for just a minute. There is the sunlight that is releasing waves of particles into our atmosphere. It brings life to Earth, and without the sunlight, there is no life on Earth. So light waves, particles, protons, there seems to be some type of intelligence to it. And that is what all of this stuff is alluding to. Because if we stand in the middle of the light in Earth, then what is cast out of us is a shadow. That is very interesting, guys. So we will move on, and let me say this again. Just by looking at the particles, it changes. Keep that in mind as we move forward. That made me think, what if the same is true for synchronicity? Because here's what happened to me, guys. I began to notice when people were calling, I was actually thinking about them, or bringing up topics that I had journaled about, and then someone brung up the same topic. So at first, it felt like magic, and then I started to pay attention, and that is where things got interested. I even documented and started writing these things down, and then it all stopped. It kind of felt weird, a bit strange, or at least it became rare, almost like a phenomenon that it was aware that I was watching. That was a little bit spooky. I'll be honest with you guys. When we start to pay attention to things, just like the observer effect, it is hard for it not to change or to be noticed. It is the noticing of things, right? Have you ever had somebody point out something that you're doing, and then for some reason or another, you start to pay attention to it? It's just like riding a bicycle, just like learning to ride a bicycle. The moment you realize that you no longer have training wheels or someone helping you is the moment you start to wobble on your balance, because you are paying attention to what you are being and what you are becoming, instead of like the dancer becoming one with the music. Very interesting. All of this made me wonder, is our awareness powerful enough to shift reality? Does the mind function like a flashlight? Wherever you point it, the wave collapses into form. And by focusing on the phenomenon itself, we somehow change the outcome. Is that possible, guys? Because if this is true, then we are not just observers. We are participants in the unseen dance between thought, time, and energy. Now, let's step away from theory for just a minute and look at actual research. Because as strange as all this sounds, telepathy, ESP, and even thought transmission is not something that is new. People have been studying this for decades. One of the most well-known studies is from Ganzfeld experiments. Researchers wanted to test under very specific and controlled conditions. Here is how it worked. We had two people, often friends or couples. One was placed in a soundproof room with headphones playing white noise and halved ping pong balls over their eyes to create visual static. This person was the receiver. In a separate room, the sender would focus intensely on an object or video clip or something mentally and try to send it to the receiver. What were the results? Receivers guessed the correct image at the rate above chance. Let me repeat that. The rate above chance. That means it was correct more times than it was not. Was it perfect science? No. But it sparked a wave of interest in something that many people already felt in a gut level. We might be more connected than we think. Now, let's go even deeper, guys. At Princeton University, there was a lab called PEAR, the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab. This was not some strange fringe group. They were studying whether the human mind could affect machines, specifically random number generators. Basically, could focused intention subtly change the randomness of things? Again, over thousands of trials, they found statistically significant deviations were not huge, but consistent enough to say something is going on here. Then there's Dean Radlin, a leading researcher at the Institute of Noetic Sciences. He's done incredible work tracking how collective consciousness reacts to world events. One project he helped create is called the Global Consciousness Project. There are random number generators called REGs planted all over the world. Most of the time, they produce pure noise. But on days like 9/11 or during global meditations or tragedies, those machines show sudden shifts. Now, you probably know what I'm talking about here. We are talking about the graphics you see people share online where it shows the consciousness levels and the frequencies that we are shifting in and out of on a global scale. I will put some graphics on the screen. And finally, we have the classified stuff. The CIA Gateway Project. Now, guys, I talked about this before, the Monroe Project. I actually have a video on this one. From the 1970s through the early 90s, the U.S. government invested millions of dollars into studying remote viewing, the ability to physically see distant places and objects. Now, if that sounds like science fiction, just know this: many of those documents are now declassified. Indeed, guys, the government did spend a lot of money and time and research into this topic. They were serious enough to hire psychics, test them under military-grade protocols, and use them for real missions. They did this constantly. Actionable intelligence every time? No, it wasn't. But there was enough unexplained hits that it kept going for over 20 years. So guys, again, there is something pointing to this that maybe there is something a little bit more than what meets the eye. I guess that truly does make it the unseen. So when people ask me, is there any proof to this stuff? I'll just say, open your eyes. It's there. Not always in the way that we want, but in ways that make you think twice. What I find most interesting isn't just the research. It is how often you probably experience this in your own life, but most people simply brush it off. Let's not brush it off. So what do we do with all of this knowledge and information? Well, quantum physics, ESP, psychic research, even synchronicities we felt in our own lives. It's fascinating. But if we just stay in the realm of theory, then we completely miss the point. So let me offer a few practical takeaways, things that you can actually use to explore in your own life. Number 1, pay attention without obsessing. Sometimes the more we chase synchronicity, the more it hides. But if you stay in a gentle, aware state without trying to control it, you might start to see patterns more clearly. Synchronicity isn't something that you force. It is something that you recognize. Number 2, journal your thoughts and timing. Write down when you think of someone and they reach out. Note the mood you were in. Were you focusing on it? How quickly did they respond? You might discover that your emotions or intentions are key triggers here. Number 3, practice being present and stillness. Meditation, breath work, or even walking in silence can help you clear out mental noise. ESP and thought transmission don't scream, they whisper. So the quieter that your mind is, the more likely you will hear what is really there. And number 4, trust the inner signals. Now guys, signals, if you know anything about magic and sigils, there is a close relation here, whether you believe it or not. If you think of someone and suddenly get a strong emotion, or get an image, a phrase, or a song in your head, don't just ignore it. Check in, reach out, observe what happens. Sometimes it is all it takes to just realize you were tuned in all along. So guys, that last one is something that I have experienced time and time again. Trusting your inner intuition, the signals, right? We have heard the term before, signal, not noise, right? So communication, clear avoidance. The mental images, this is something that I experienced in my own life, and I will dive deep into that in just a minute before we close this video out. But there's a lot of truth to these things. We are not as separate as we have been led to believe. Your thoughts matter. Your energy has reach, and your attention may be one of the most powerful forces that you carry, along with your imagination. If this resonated with you, even just one part, drop a comment. I would love to hear from you. Anything from thought transmission to ESP, clairvoyance, psychics, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because it is not just something that you would catch on TV. The movie that comes to my mind when I think of psychics is Ghostbusters. I think it was Ray, when he was doing the talk show and he had the psychic up there and he was making fun of the psychic. But, a lot of times these things are put in front of us, and it is in movies everywhere, and they actually make fun of these things. So it is hard for us to take certain things serious. It is hard for us to take these things as truth. But sometimes truth is actually hidden in plain sight, and we don't pay attention to it. And that is a reflection of the observer effect, to notice things, right? So I want to share a few things that have happened to me that ultimately, had a lot to do with me starting my channel. A few years ago, I started to have a lot of vivid dreams, and they were full of color. They were very in detail, right? So I was learning about lucid dreaming, and I was learning about meditation, and I started to have a lot of dreams. There was a few things that I dreamed about that I could not explain. Those things led me to do more research. Symbolism in dreams, for one thing. I started to follow down that rabbit hole, and that's when I learned about the green color, because I had dreamed about a green eye. That was one of the things in my dreams. And come to find out, green is the center of the rainbow. It is also known for the heart chakra. So symbolically, in many ways, I took that as a sign that, well, maybe I need to really learn more about the heart chakra. I need to learn about all of them and the different color ranges. And those things, when I started to correlate the color ranges and the contrast in thoughts being black and white, I started to understand a lot about duality of life itself. So the journey did actually lead me to discover a lot about myself and a lot about reality that I really didn't know. And had I not had those dreams, I wouldn't be sitting here today. Another thing that I had dreamed of, it was more of a meditative daydream. I knew that the company I worked for was going to be sold before it happened. And I don't know how I knew, but I knew. There were other things that happened in my life that I seen happen before they happened. And there was no way I could explain it. And I honestly felt like telling people would make me seem like I was crazy. So much of it I held to myself while I did research and started to produce content for my channel. But slowly I started to realize that the more I paid attention to something, the more it seemed to change. And when I stopped paying attention, it returned. Very interesting. So, what do you guys think? Do you think that telepathy, I get tongue-tied saying that, telepathy is real? Do you think thought transmission is real? I do believe in many ways that there is a lot of truth to this. And I do believe that being around other people and listening to them talk is another form of telepathy. For example, if you have to sit, let's say a waiting room, for example, and you hear people talking, your mind is generating images in your imagination. Now, your attention may be focused on something. Maybe you're reading a magazine. Maybe you're scrolling through your phone. But you are still picking up the stories and the language of people around you. Your imagination is still going. Your subconscious is still recording. And those mental images are still playing out. So when we are too externalized with our attention, we may not notice these subtle things, but they do influence us. If you follow the Neville Goddard teachings, he often talks about how our own thoughts are influenced by others, whether we want to or not. And it is the appearance, right? A person can only reflect the appearance that you are putting out. So, for example, if you are in a high vibrational love, because love is the highest vibration of all, then likely you will notice all green flags. You will notice how things work out for you. You will notice how blessings are constantly unfolding for you. But if you are in a low vibration, if you are filled with inner conflict, then perhaps you might feel like the universe is effing you. And believe it or not, 3.5 years ago, I actually said that. Nothing works out for me. Everything is working against me. My life is screwed. The universe hates me. I actually had that perception, and guess what, guys? I noticed it a lot. And that's because that is where my attention, my focal point was being placed. And that was the reflection I was getting back from everything around me. So do I believe that these things hold truth? I honestly do. From the bottom of my heart, believe that these things do hold some truth. Now, we all can debate on the variance of degree of what is true and what is not true, but it is hard to escape the reality that some of this stuff does hold a lot of truth, guys. Sometimes when somebody pops in your head, they may just simply be thinking about you, or they may, on a subconscious level, you're in the back of their mind, or perhaps they are worrying about something. That's another thing. Somebody could be worrying, maybe there was a burnt bridge or regrets or things from the past, and they kind of want to make things right but don't know what to say. And so you might get this anxious feeling when you think about someone because there is maybe there's no closure, maybe there's things that were left unsaid, maybe there were things that should have been said that were never said. And so the intuition, right, the feeling inside of us has a anxious or a anxiety feel to it when that person pops in our head or event or thing, honestly. So that goes back to the idea that we are attaching an emotional state to a thought pattern. So every time that comes back around in our thought processes, it is like pulling the emotional cord that matches that vibrational image, the imprint. I do believe that imprinting is a real thing, that is the first impression that we make, right? So in the beginning of this, we talked about once a particle is connected, it is always and forever connected, no matter the time or space. So the impression is the imprint. And when we do word breakdowns, we start to see a lot of things that are hidden in the English language itself. And that to me is a very interesting concept. And I've done a whole separate video about the English language itself, because English, English, words that are spelled different, but the pronunciation, the sound vibration that leaves the tongue when these words are spoken into existence. It is like sonar, right? The sound goes out, or radar. Radar is radiating outward. The thoughts radiate out, and it is bouncing off of an object and being reflected back to you. So sometimes people cannot appear to you in a certain emotional range because they do not have it within them to reflect back. That is the situations we find ourselves in where the relations are not really equally yoked, right? There is a power struggle or a power dynamic between two individuals where there is manipulation, there is forced connections, or being hyper possessive or obsessive over another individual, because there is actually an insecurity when it comes to attachment styles. And again, I'm talking about how the emotions and the thought patterns are attached to each other or detached, because you can study the laws of detachment, right? To detach from a situation or a circumstance does not mean that it didn't happen. It is causing a separation between the emotions and the event itself. So that is part of like a deep trauma healing and releasing of energetic blocks so that we can reflect back certain things. Perhaps unconditional love is something that we all 8 billion people on the planet desire for themselves, to be unconditionally loved and seen for who they are and all their flaws, and still be loved for who they are. I most certainly want that for myself, my kids, and people that I know and love. So that is a real thing, guys, and I firmly stand behind that. And if you're still here, I want to tell you that I'm very grateful for you. And if you have been watching my channel for a very long time, from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate you, and I truly love you, like I do, because you have made this possible, and you have helped push my content and push myself. I always try to push myself, but it is very helpful to have your comments, your feedbacks, and your ideas, guys. It has truly meant a lot to me. For 3 years, I've done this alone. When I say I've done it alone, I mean like I come home from work and I'm alone. And it's not a pity party. It is truly not a pity party. In the beginning, it seemed like, when is this ever going to end? But at the same time, the more I started to notice things, the more I started to pay attention to things that for the 45 years of my life, I had never really given much attention to. These were just things that I brushed off. When I started paying attention to them, boy, did I start noticing things that I did not see before. When I started paying attention to the moon cycles, I started to notice that the moon was actually out during the daytime. I started to see the moon when I would walk out of buildings or get in my vehicle. All of a sudden, I'm like, oh, wow, there's the moon. It is 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It is 1 o'clock in the afternoon. There's the moon. And when I started to observe the sun, I started to sun gaze. I started early in the morning or late in the evenings just looking in the direction of the sun with my eyes closed. But slowly over time, I started to open my eyes and look directly into the sun. The one thing that we are all told not to do. And guess what? I'm sitting here in front of you making YouTube content. And my channel is growing. My content and ideas are still expanding and unfolding in front of everyone. So just because we were told not to do certain things does not make it always true. However, in the beginning, when I first started sun gazing, yeah, my eyes watered. They felt irritated a bit. But eventually, it got to the point where it felt natural. Like I enjoy getting sunlight in my eyes now, because guess what? Black holes, right? We think of something in space, but black holes, we have 2 black holes in our eyes, and the light enters our eyes and it does not escape. Why? Because our body is vibration, right? It says we are particles and everything vibrates. We are a slower vibration, and guess what? When light slows down, it begins to take form. We are a form. So the slower something becomes, the more solid it appears. Just like the whole concept of water turning to vapor when it is hot, or it turns into a solid as ice when it is cold. Light, as it slows down, right? We've heard the terminology, the speed of light. What happens when it slows down? It starts to take a physical form. So the whole concept of we are created in the Creator's image is us. Guys, it is us. Every human being on this planet is created in the Creator's image. And the image comes from the imagination. I magic nation, or I image a nation. Ever how you want to see it. magic, magnify, focal point, magnify the focal point. Does it make sense with the unseen forces? The imagination itself is something that is hard to see, but we all know that it is there. And guys, I hope that you enjoyed this episode, and I hope that it helped you to see how some of these things are connected. And I will be seeing you very soon. Thank you, as always, for watching Hypnovision Studios.